She was merely the janitor's daughter, invisible, overlooked, without an important surname or famous followers. But in a blink, Eleanor was pulled into the orbit of Marcus Thorne, the most feared and relentless magnate in New York City, forced into a contract marriage to atone for a mistake she didn't commit. She accepted silently. Yet Marcus had no idea what he had just awakened, because sometimes it's precisely those with nothing to lose who change everything. The hallway of St. Jude's Hospital felt stiflingly hot. The distant wail of sirens blended with the whirring of old fans and the sharp scent of disinfectant. Eleanor, eyes red and fingers trembling, gripped the unconscious hand of her mother on the gurney. "Severe exhaustion," the doctor mumbled. "How many jobs does she work?" he asked, not looking up from his clipboard. "3," Eleanor replied, her voice thick with emotion. Just then, 2 men in dark suits entered, ignoring the receptionist. "Eleanor Vance," one of them called out, already expecting her to follow. "Who are you?" she challenged, bewildered. "Mr. Thorne demands your presence. Now." Hours later, seated before a glass table overlooking the Manhattan skyline, she heard her sentence. "Your former partner vanished with over $500,000 under your name, and now, either you marry me or your mother loses everything she has." Eleanor Vance was born backstage in a world that was never hers. While other children learned French and took ballet, she grew up amidst mops, buckets, and industrial cleaning supplies, waiting for her mother to finish the night shift at a private school in Queens. Mrs. Clara Vance was known as Clara the Cleaner, discreet, punctual, always with a packed lunch and a hidden ache in her back. From a young age, Eleanor understood 2 things: that she would be judged by what she wore, and because of that, learning to sew could be her shield. At 13, she refashioned used clothes. At 17, she sewed dresses for neighbors. At 23, she set up a makeshift atelier in her backyard. It was small, but it was hers. And then came David. A wide smile, gentle words, the idea of opening a joint apparel business. He spoke of the future with such lightness that Eleanor believed him. She signed contracts without truly reading them, lent her name to open a business account, and, months later, woke up alone. The atelier closed, the account frozen. The debt, $612,800 in her name. The police said David had left the country. The bank said the debt was hers, and her mother said they would figure it out. But her body began to demand its due too. A collapse at work turned into hospitalization, and there, with her mother on a gurney and humiliation clinging to her chest, Eleanor heard the most absurd proposal of her life. Marcus Thorne, president of a real estate empire, sought no forgiveness, no pity. He wanted a facade. He needed a wife by year-end to secure control of Thorne Holdings. His grandmother, the group's matriarch, threatened to withdraw her endorsement from the board if he didn't form a decent family. "It's just for a year. You sign, smile for the cameras, play the part. In return, your debt vanishes and your mother returns home." Eleanor swallowed hard. "This is a kidnapping with a wedding ring," she murmured, more to herself than to him. But when she recalled the hospital scene, her tarnished name, and the now ruined atelier, she knew she had no choice. It was there that everything began to unravel. Eleanor never craved luxury. She never dreamed of gracing magazine covers or attending dinners where no one knew her name. All she desired was respect. A room with machines neatly aligned, women from underserved communities learning a trade, a daycare nearby, so no mother had to choose between her child and her livelihood. A place where no one had to apologize for being poor, and that's what she demanded from Marcus. "If I'm going along with this charade, I want something in return. You will fund a training center for seamstresses in the Bronx. Courses, facilities, dignity. And no just putting your name on the building. I want a real project." He stared at her as if she'd asked for the moon. Then he smiled, cynical, brave or foolish, but interesting. Days later, she was thrust into the Thorne universe. The penthouse in Soho had a private elevator, 2 chefs, a personal stylist, and an assistant named Bethany, who looked at her as if she were dirt dragged in from the street. "You need to learn to walk in heels before the introductory dinner," she stated. "The Thorne family doesn't tolerate suburban ways." On the appointed night, Eleanor wore a rented red gown, makeup applied by a team who barely acknowledged her, and a borrowed necklace worth enough to buy 2 apartments in Queens. The dinner was at the matriarch's mansion, Mrs. Abigail Thorne. The house felt like a museum of marble and silence. In the center of the table, candelabras she'd only seen in movies. Around her, sharp gazes and questions disguised as curiosity. "Eleanor, right? Such a common name," said one of Marcus's sisters-in-law, holding a wine glass as if it were her own ego. "And you really sew? Like, with your hands?" She took a deep breath. She responded firmly but without arrogance. And that's when Mrs. Abigail spoke. From her 82 years, "I want to understand what exactly made my grandson, with all the options in the world, choose you." Silence. Everyone expected a sweet, modest, perhaps grateful answer. Eleanor straightened her posture. "Perhaps because I don't need him." The room froze. "Or perhaps because I'm the only one here who isn't pretending to be something I'm not." Marcus said not a word, didn't defend her, didn't smile. He merely crossed his arms and observed. Later, locked in a bedroom decorated by someone who had never known rent, Eleanor stared at the ceiling, her heart crushed. She had dreamed of respect, of building. But what she found was humiliation disguised as luxury, and even so, she still believed she could fix everything. That gilded mansion with its ocean view and glass walls was actually a cell of silence. Eleanor woke up every day to a preset schedule, clothes chosen by Bethany, rehearsed smiles, public engagements she barely understood. At each event, a new demand. Hold his arm, smile more, speak less. And Marcus? Cordial, impeccable, cold. The kind who knew where to place his hand for photos, but couldn't remember to ask if she'd slept well. At night, they barely spoke. The marriage was only on paper, but the loneliness was real. A contract of appearances, where she was just a pawn, disposable. In the 3rd week, a gossip columnist published, "Tycoon Marcus Thorne marries bankrupt seamstress, whirlwind romance or marketing ploy." Her social security number was exposed. Her debts listed. The house phone rang incessantly until the call came that shattered everything. It was Mrs. Clara crying from the hospital. "Daughter, they're saying you were bought, that you sold yourself. Why are they saying this about you?" Eleanor bit her fist to stifle a loud sob. "Because they don't know us, Mom, but one day they will." She hung up and went to Marcus's office. "The Center Project? How is it coming along? I want to be closely involved." Bethany answered before him, "That was a symbolic clause, Eleanor. You don't need to get truly involved. It's just social marketing." That sentence landed like a punch. A clear warning that everything was a lie. That night she went down to the garden. Barefoot, dressed only in an old sweatshirt, she sat on the cold grass, heedless of the security cameras. She needed to feel the ground again, needed to remember who she was. That's when she heard, from the other side of the glass wall, Marcus's voice. "She's useful, that's all. After the board approves the transition, she can go. The charade will have served its purpose." Eleanor didn't cry. She simply stood up, walked upstairs, and faced her reflection in the mirror. She saw not a wife nor a woman, but a shadow. "How did I let this happen?" she whispered. In the early hours, she turned on her laptop. She began researching NGOs, community projects, crowdfunding platforms. Alone, without his millions, without the fake smiles. 2 days later, she took a crowded bus to the neighborhood where, on paper, the promised training center was supposed to operate. The address existed, but what she found was an abandoned warehouse with broken windows, cracked walls, and overgrown weeds choking the entrance. She stood there, unsure whether to cry or scream. But then she heard a voice behind her. "Are you going to open that place?" It was a girl of about 12, torn t-shirt, notebook in hand. "I don't know, but I want to. My mum knows how to sew. If there's a class, she'll come. And bring me too." The girl smiled and ran off. Eleanor didn't move. Her heart pulsed in a strange way. It hurt, but it also warmed her. On the way home, she didn't cry. She sat at the table, organized documents, called old contacts, and spent the night rewriting the project. This time without marketing, without a facade signature, a real project for real women. The next day, she left a printed copy at Marcus's office door. No note, no plea, no warning. That morning, upon waking, she didn't feel happy, but she felt whole, and that was more than she had felt in weeks. Have you ever had to swallow tears just to avoid breaking down in front of everyone? Have you ever smiled to keep everything together, even when you were in pieces inside? If you know exactly how that hurts, comment below. I know the feeling. It's our way of connecting on this channel, heart to heart. I'm reading everything. The next morning, Eleanor had coffee alone in the silent kitchen. The penthouse lights still off, Bethany gone, Marcus secluded in some glass-walled meeting. She opened her email and saw a reply from an NGO in West Harlem. "We will help. Send us the complete project." Immediately she took the bus again, returning to the abandoned warehouse. But this time, it wasn't to hurt herself. It was to imagine. She looked at the crumbling ceiling and envisioned machines instead of dust. Children playing where there was now overgrown grass. Women arriving with bags, leaving with diplomas and self-esteem. An elderly woman with a shopping bag passed by and stopped beside her. "This used to be a factory, you know. My husband worked here. After it closed, the neighborhood got sadder. What if it became a school of sewing, of life?" The woman smiled. "Then, my dear, then everything changes." Eleanor returned home with a new feeling. It wasn't optimism, it was a mission. Upon arriving, she saw Marcus on the balcony, on his phone. He didn't even notice her presence, and for the first time, it didn't bother her, because at that moment she didn't need to be seen by him. She needed to be seen by herself. She walked upstairs with light steps. The project was in the NGO's hands. The land, mapped. The name, she had already chosen. The Thread House, because she wanted everyone to feel welcome. Thread, because sewing is also rebuilding. That night, she looked in the mirror again. But now, she no longer sought flaws. She sought strength. For the first time in weeks, she tied her hair back as she did at her old atelier in Astoria. She picked up her old notebook with sketched patterns, placed the pencil behind her ear, and smiled. She didn't know if everything would work out, didn't know if Marcus would read the new project or if he even cared. But, for the first time, she wanted to try. The next day, the breakfast table was set, but empty. No note, no message. Eleanor sat alone, a binder in her hand and the revised project. She jotted down ideas, highlighted deadlines, sketched organizational charts as if the whole world depended on that paper. Marcus walked past her in a hurry, on his way to another meeting. He paused for a second, glanced at the papers, and continued without a word. And she wasn't fazed. For the first time, she wasn't waiting for his approval. That week, Eleanor visited 2 NGOs, met volunteer architects, and contacted a retired former sewing instructor. She was slowly, silently, building a network. On Friday, when Marcus arrived home early, he found a manila envelope on his desk. Inside, the new project, complete, with a map, budget, social impact analysis, and even an execution timeline. No signature, no request, just a title on the cover, The Thread House, by Eleanor Vance. With that same night, she was in the living room, adjusting the hem of a dress Bethany had sent to be shortened, without asking, of course, when Marcus appeared at the door. "You still sew?" he asked, as if it were a flaw. "I still breathe too." "Do you want to know for how long?" she replied without averting her gaze. He hesitated, then he left. Silence. But something was beginning to shift. On Saturday, Marcus didn't go to the office. He stayed home For the first time, the two shared the same room, each in their corner. Eleanor with her patterns and threads, Marcus with a tablet and a troubled expression. On Sunday, she saw him reading the project. On Monday, upon waking, there was a meeting scheduled in her name, room 7. Social impact presentation. Marcus said nothing, but next to the title on the paper, there was a handwritten note. You have 15 minutes. Convince me. Eleanor smiled, not because he finally yielded, but because now she no longer needed permission to try. The meeting room was enormous, cold, all glass and brushed steel. Eleanor entered alone, her binder clutched to her chest, her heart pounding against her ribs. Marcus was already there, surrounded by 3 executives she had never seen before, men in tight blazers, bored gazes, expensive pens. She took a deep breath. She presented each stage of the project with clarity, even as her voice wavered at times. She spoke of impact, of female autonomy, of urban revitalization. One of the men interrupted, "But what does Thorn Holdings gain from this?" Eleanor smiled without cynicism. Perhaps for the first time, something that cannot be bought, social respect. The silence was uncomfortable, but Marcus didn't interrupt, didn't scoff. He just watched her, serious, yes, but different. When the meeting ended, he walked her to the elevator. You presented well, but it will be difficult. I know, she replied. The whole world reminds me of that every day. That night in her room, Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed and broke down, not from pain, but from exhaustion. Everything was still so uncertain. At any moment, everything could collapse. What if I fail again? She murmured. She opened the drawer and took out a note her mother had left at the hospital weeks earlier. You are my finest stitch, daughter. The one who, even torn inside, still learned to mend life. She cried in silence, clutching that piece of paper. The next day, Marcus was waiting for her at the breakfast table, alone. Shirt sleeves rolled up, no designer watch. The team agreed to start the procedures. But only if you're willing to learn real management. It's not a showpiece NGO, it's a structural project. I am. I just don't know if I can handle it. Then learn. I learned not to depend on anyone. You will learn to lead. Eleanor hesitated. He seemed more human there, but she still felt the weight of everything. What if I fall? Fall with strategy, then get up stronger. She nodded. It wasn't a promise. It was a silent pact. But then his phone rang. He answered, paled, stood up abruptly. What? What do you mean, collapse? The world froze around them. Which building? Marcus asked, already on his feet. On the other end of the line, agitated voices, broken words, sirens in the background. One of the buildings in Hudson Yards. Part of the structure collapsed. 3 workers injured, 1 in critical condition. He hung up the phone. His eyes unfocused, his face ashen. I need to go. Eleanor stood up too. Then go. But don't go alone. Half an hour later, they arrived at the construction site. Police cars, ambulances, journalists, dust in the air, shouts. A group of workers stared at the ground, as if waiting for answers no one could give. Marcus got out of the car without his jacket, without his usual armor, without his shield. He walked straight into the risk area without waiting for authorization. Eleanor followed, ignoring the safety warnings. They found one of the injured men sitting in a corner, his arm bandaged and his face smudged with dust. Are you okay? Marcus asked, kneeling in front of the man. Lost 2 friends today, but I'm breathing. That's more than I expected. Marcus lowered his head. I'm sorry. This is my fault. The man stared at him. Fault of those who sign without seeing, who trust too much in those they shouldn't. There, in the mud, Marcus understood. It wasn't just about a building. It was about everything, about the way he had lived, about what he had ignored, about what he had allowed, in the name of power. Hours later, back at the company headquarters, the shareholders were gathered. They demanded his immediate resignation. Thorn Holdings cannot bear this scandal. Your continued presence will be costly. Marcus listened in silence. When they opened for his response, he looked at Eleanor, who was watching from the doorway. And then he spoke. If I leave now, you save the facade, but you lose the foundation. Because the truth is, this place is rotten from the inside, and I was part of it." He turned to the others. "But if you want to rebuild, with transparency, truth, real impact, then let's do it, but our way." The next day, live on national television, Marcus appeared before the cameras. "I made mistakes, as a leader, as a businessman, and as a man. And because of that, today I announce the biggest restructuring in Thorn Holdings history." He fired the entire involved board, created an emergency fund for the affected families, and appointed a new social impact corps with Eleanor at the helm. She stood beside him, without makeup, without rehearsed smiles, just present. And there, before the entire country, the most powerful and feared man in the city bowed, not to the scandal, but to the love that silently was beginning to blossom. 3 months later, the abandoned warehouse in the Bronx was now the pulsating heart of a forgotten neighborhood. On the facade, embroidered fabric letters read, "The Thread House" by Eleanor Vance. Inside, the scent of fresh coffee mingled with the hum of sewing machines and the unrestrained laughter of women of all ages. Children ran in the courtyard. There was a shelf with used toys, and colorful fabrics hung like flags of resistance. In the corner, Mrs. Clara organized cones of thread as if they were rare jewels. She smiled in a floral apron, the same one she used when cleaning bathrooms. Only now, no one dictated to her. Eleanor was in the center of the room, teaching a difficult stitch to a teenage student. Pull, twist, breathe. That's what sewing is. It's like starting over with care. The gate creaked. Marcus appeared with 2 boxes in his hands. Jeans folded, sleeves rolled up, a gaze that no longer needed to apologize. "Brought the new shipment of sustainable fabrics," he said. "And the material from the refugee cooperative also arrived." Eleanor approached. He placed the boxes on the floor and took an envelope from his pocket. "What's this?" "Plans for the house my father never managed to build. One he designed before he died, back in upstate New York." She opened it carefully. A simple 2-story house, wide porch, trees all around. On the paper, the firm lines of an interrupted dream. "I want to build it with you. A place without masks, without contracts. A space just ours." Eleanor looked at him, unhurriedly. She didn't say yes. She didn't say, "I love you." She didn't need to, because it was all there. In the respect in his gaze, in the gesture of bringing with his own hands what he used to have someone else deliver. On the warehouse porch, they sat side by side, watching the end of class, listening to happy voices. It was the same place where everything began: invisibility, debt, humiliation. But now it was a sea. She squeezed his hand slowly. "I never thought the worst choice of my life would bring me here." "Neither did I," he replied, looking at the students as if he finally saw them. And there they stayed, without needing to prove anything. Because when pain becomes a bridge, the path changes. Eleanor thought she needed to be accepted, that she would only have worth when someone important said so aloud. But the truth is, her value was never in the eyes of others. It was always in the courage not to give up. She didn't conquer the world, but she conquered the fear of existing in silence. She built something real with her own hands, stitching dignity where there was once only rejection. Marcus, on the other hand, spent his life believing that control was power, that loving meant opening dangerous breaches. But he discovered, late but not too late, that the true risk is living without any connection. That vulnerability, when chosen, becomes strength. And that character is not inherited. It's built. The biggest change wasn't in their positions, in the projects, or in the company. It was in them. 2 worlds that should never have crossed paths. And precisely because of that, created something new. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson for those on the other side of the screen right now. Perhaps you too have felt disposable, invisible, as if your story didn't carry enough weight to change anything. But let me tell you something, from the bottom of my heart. The world may not see you, but you don't need its permission to rise. Your pain can become a seed. Your fall can become a path. And what you do with what broke you might just be what heals others. If this story moved you in any way, leave a like below. It's the simplest way to say it was worth telling this. Now tell me in the comments, from what city are you watching? I read everything with care and reply to those who take a moment to write here. Truly. And if you believe in the power of stories like this, subscribe to the channel. We're just getting started, and every new subscription gives me more strength to keep creating with soul. Oh, don't leave yet. Choose one of the two stories on the screen now and stay with us. I'll see you in the next video.